Good morning. This is Matthew Sloniker, host of Growth in Action, and I am pleased this morning to be spending some time with Chris Ouellete. Chris is somebody I've been working with over the last, Chris, 4 or 5 months, helping Chris in his transition from the military. And pleased to announce that he has launched his consulting practice, O2 Solutions. And so, Chris, let's dive in. Let's start with, tell us a little bit about your background and what's your story?
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to go and speak with me today about, my background, a little bit about myself. So I was born in Portland, Maine. I'm a New Englander, and I only spent about 7 years there initially or so because parents, unfortunately, they separated, but my soon-to-be stepdad was he was a football coach. He was into all different sports. He got his master's degree in physical education at Norwich University there in Vermont, and eventually he ended up going out to Texas A&M University to get his PhD there in physical education as well. What did that mean for me is that I went to 3 different high schools. And those of you who've done that, you know how tough those kind of things can be moving quite often, but it kind of made me very diverse, and then I had to go and make friends fast and work hard to go and influence people, but I became pretty adept at that. I ended up trying to, I was going to be a doctor. That was my plan. I'm not a doctor, but I went to the Air Force Academy as a biology major, with that being my full intention. Unfortunately, I was not able to get a slot for medical school, but it was a blessing because I ended up being an aircraft maintenance officer for C-130s out at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base down there at Tucson. And I really enjoyed my time there, deployed a couple of times to Aviano Air Base out in Italy, and in charge of about like 50 different folks that we had to launch aircraft. This would be during our Bosnia-Herzegovina war that was going on out there. I did that for about a couple of years, and like I said, I enjoyed it. But at the time, I was being courted by the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. That's kind of like the FBI or NCIS of the Air Force. So lots of it's your special agent, lots of federal level investigations. You're running, drug kind of cases, counterintelligence programs as well. You're looking at, sexual assaults, fraud investigations for millions of dollars, murders. All of these kind of things were very exciting and interesting for me as far as being able to go and thwart terrorists, thwart Russian and Chinese spies, and doing this kind of thing all around the world. So I supported the Department of Defense and their various missions, supported combatant commands at Strategic Command, which owns all the nuclear weapons, and most recently out at U.S. Space Command, which is where I ended up retiring from at here in lovely Colorado Springs, which is where I'm taking this call from you. So I really enjoyed my time with the military, but I've now come to the point where I've been transitioning out and looking for new challenges and new adventures.
And Chris, like you and I were talking about last week, I think a lot of us veterans are proud of what we achieved, but I think in your case too, you retired as a rank of colonel. So
Sure.
Any words of wisdom for those young officers that want to stay in and make it a career?
Well, I would say the military is one of the best things that you can do for yourself, not just because you're serving your country. But Matt, as you know, also being a Navy combat veteran yourself, you are giving back to the nation, but the nation's given to you, right? Your housing's being taken care of, all your insurance, which I find out now not being in the military, right? These things can be pretty expensive. Free education. I've got, a master's degree, bachelor's degree that was all paid for by the military. And you get exposed to living in places that, all around the world. I was sent to go learn Japanese. I got a master's degree in East Asian Studies for National Security Affairs. I lived in Japan for 3 years. My wife lived in Korea, then joined me in Japan as well. Lived in Germany for 3 years as a commander out there. And as you know, when you're in Europe, everything's pretty close, right? France was only 30 minutes away. So great travel opportunities to go and see the world and really open up your aperture. So it was very rewarding for me. And, being a colonel afforded me lots of opportunities to really understand how our government works and make it a better place. So I certainly encourage those who haven't gone into the military to consider it, and those that are in, keep on doing it. I thank you for your service.
Yeah. Great words of wisdom there, Chris. Thank you so much for that, sir. Let's talk about, what are the 3 things that you're most proud of?
Well, again, like you, during time in combat, I found that was probably the most integral, fundamental time for me, because you're putting yourself out in harm's way, and when you do that, you really kind of see the person that you are. But more importantly, as a leader of men and women, you're seeing how they react under those pressures, but also yourself, right? And being able to do that in times of war was very rewarding. Particularly, 9/11, which we, a month ago, had another anniversary of that. My son, Gabe, was asking me, what were you doing in 9/11 and where'd you go? Well, so after 9/11, I ended up deploying about a couple months later out to Sheikh Isa Air Base in Bahrain and running a small OSI detachment. Again, that's Office of Special Investigations detachment. What we were doing at that base was to protect all the men and women, all the airmen that were there assigned to the base, who were doing refueling for bombing runs and refuelers all throughout Afghanistan, as we were taking it to the Taliban and to Al-Qaeda during that time. So we did that for 6 months. It got a little dicey during those times, where we had some insurgents literally burned down the outside of the embassy, and we're doing lots of protests. So it was a little crazy, but again, that was only a 6 months time, but I did so well, they brought me back for a year, but this time as a deputy commander out in Qatar at Al Udeid Air Base. And during that 1-year time frame, as a deputy commander, we're in charge of a squadron that oversaw 200 agents spread throughout the Middle East. And so that's a lot of folks, in harm's way. But what they're trying to do is to, find, fix, track, and identify lots of insurgents. We had about, during my 1-year tenure, 400 threats were identified. We directed, as a deputy commander, 1,500 outside the wire missions. What that means is going outside of the base, which is dangerous in Afghanistan and Iraq, as you know. And but going and trying to make sure you're wrapping up the people who are launching rockets onto your base and planting IEDs, right? Those roadside bombs. Lots of those missions, when you get out among the people and you go and recruit folks who are more on your side and more to your cause, which ultimately neutralized 388 insurgents all told. So that was very rewarding for me, because it had a large impact on the effects were being provided based upon the actions that me and my troops were doing, and certainly like a combat tested leadership. So that'd be my first one, Matt. I'd say the second was, I alluded to my time in Germany, there in Ramstein Air Base. I was a squadron commander we had about 40 agents for an elite squadron that was there at the largest overseas base in the Air Force, and that's at Ramstein. In particular, we had a strategic threat that was facing us, where the whole base had been terrorized for about a year by a certain party. And we thought it had gone away, found out within my first 2 weeks of being there that no, it was back. And it had a diverse presence in the United States and also there at Ramstein. So quickly stood up a 35-man international team, right? So America, Germans, we had some Belgians and French that were also part of this team. And we had to go and canvass out 10 different locations, plus set up another team there in the United States to go and do surveillance and counter some of the movements that were happening at that same time. After 6 months worth or so of coordinated activities, we were collecting lots of evidence, doing surveillance, interrogations of people, we were able to go and resolve that matter, and a pleasant experience, which resulted in sentencing of multiple lives in prison for those that individual and folks. Lastly, in the middle of COVID in 2020, I came out here to U.S. Space Command in Colorado Springs, and there's 11 combatant commands. Combatant commands are basically hubs for execution of wartime planning and action. And space, we say, is never a day without space, right? Everything in space these are vital things. Like if you took a GPS and you use your map on your phone today, well, GPS was enabling those kind of functions, or using your computer, right? The conversations we're having, they're all being enabled by space assets, by satellites, by downlinks and uplinks, control stations, even taking out money from an ATM bank, right? All of that is being controlled by the timing of space assets. The U.S. Space Command controls all the Department of Defense assets, and of course works with other entities to include, for example, Starlink. When the Russian army, whether their forces invaded Ukraine, everybody thought Ukraine would be wiped out within a week or so. But we worked together with Elon Musk to have Starlink be out around the world that would provide Ukraine the communications that were necessary for when the Russians were knocking out their communication forces. Starlink provided another way for them to have back and forth command and control with their troops. And that was really like a nail on the head point for me, where I understood that space really can have a huge impact on everything that goes on in the world today, not just in a localized area. That's why I showed up. We had 4 people initially in our division, which was counterintelligence and human intelligence, and over a 4-year time frame, I expanded it to 40. Actually, there's probably more people than that now, but 40 people when I departed, 5 different locations. And as you can understand, it was a massive undertaking to hire all those people on, make sure they're the right folks and properly vetted, to understanding how to have a human intelligence area while a counterintelligence capability at the same time, to protect all of the assets and satellites. We're talking billions of dollars, and getting all that done and as fast as we could. That was very, very important to get that done, and I'm proud of everything that we accomplished to make that happen.
Very impressive. It reinforces, and I was, again, somewhat surprised again to really come down to earth and realize the importance of, the satellite communications and space, and how important that is to our everyday life. And I don't think right now a lot of people understand that. So it's good to put that in context. I dealt with crypto and intelligence in combat ships, what we call it outboard. So every now and then it's good to kind of bring it back. And like you, I enjoyed when I was out to sea doing the job. It was when I was in port chipping paint off the deck that I didn't enjoy it. Well, I wasn't a colonel, so obviously rank, there's privileges. Let's talk about O2. Why are you starting O2?
Well, thank you for that question, Matt. I appreciate it. So, as I was saying, I've got a broad variety of skill sets that I was able to go and incur during my time throughout the military, a 30-year career. And fortunately, as a colonel with 30 years in, you get to have a good amount of a pension. Again, good reason to go and stay into the military, at least join, right? And that pension has afforded me the time and the bandwidth to go and reflect and not have to jump right back into the job site, right, and just start doing a job that I don't necessarily want to do. I can take the time to kind of pick and choose where I want to put my efforts. And when I do then I can do 100% of my time into what I want because it's of my own choosing. So realizing that my skill sets of strategic thinking, problem solving, communications at an executive kind of level, all the way down to the lower level as necessary, project management, adaptability, and overall senior leadership. Because I have that kind of skill set, I wanted to be able to offer that to some of companies and non-governmental organizations who not necessarily are struggling, but perhaps they could do better, right? They're to go from good to great. And that is something that I can provide assistance to these different companies out there. So initially, when I was looking at what I wanted to focus on as a consultant, was to assist some of these companies that may be more within the area where I have come from, that would understand me, right? So whether they're U.S. Or allied, military, the governments that are all levels that I've dealt with at a local, at a state, and at a federal kind of level, or any of the NGOs that I've dealt with here in the Colorado Springs, or say like the U.S. Olympic Museum, or committees. These folks could all benefit from the background that I have as far as providing expertise into leadership, strategy, security in different operations. And I do have a bench of personnel that I can call upon to expand as needed, right? So whether it's executive coaching or leadership workshops or leadership assessments, there's different tools that we have in our toolkit, different programs where you can do personality assessments that would go and do in-depth looks at the personnel that are working for these companies, but also in the leaders that are there themselves. That are leaders, things that we can provide. There's also strategic planning, where you're looking at market research and business strategy and roadmaps. I've done strategic planning almost my entire career in the military, and that's something that's really inherent. And we can do a good overview of those kind of things and deep dive as necessary. Of course, security is probably the biggest thing that I have as far as background and experience, whether it's risk management, cybersecurity, compliance, insider threat. These are all programs that I have run at different locations all throughout my time in the Air Force. And we can do good assessment, especially if it's like an insider threat situation, or just kind of looking about how a company may be postured in ways that, say, outsiders or insiders could be looking at it. And lastly, operations and streamlining their own improved efficiencies. I have, with my aircraft maintenance background, there's a lot of logistics that I was able to go and look at and understand, and I can really deep dive into those areas. So that's kind of why I stood up O2 Solutions, to offer up some of my capabilities to different companies and NGOs as they need them. To, again, maybe they're already pretty good, but we can take a look at it and maybe make them better.
So, Chris, that's a topic near and dear, and something that I advise on. I see this mistake a lot in startups, but even larger enterprises. When you ask them, who's the ideal client and why?
Yeah.
Well, talk about the client profile that you see the most success coming from, and why.
Gotcha. That excellent question, Matt. I kind of alluded to a little earlier before, but my ideal client would be the folks that are more understanding of the background that I have and understand where I come from. To kind of flesh it out a little bit more, after I was leaving Space Command, I did a fellowship for several months in the mayor's office here in Colorado Springs. And I divided my time between two different subsets, if you will. One was for setting up the strategic plan, which is essentially where are you going to take the city of Colorado Springs over the next 5 years. And we created working groups. And those working groups, about 40 subject matter experts from key companies and NGOs within the area, we focused on public safety, infrastructure, economic development, community activation, and housing solutions. So during that time, I became very familiar with each of these SMEs and understood where we wanted to go and drive that that vision and goals for the actual city itself. And very rewarding, really understood about where you want to make a difference within the city and how you can move it forward. And that impacted at the city and state and federal level. I also spend the other half of my time working for Sally Clark, who was is the senior advisor to the mayor right now for government affairs and for military liaison. And she had a whole host of things to go and focus on. But mostly the things that she brought me in on was working with, so government affairs, tracking all the bills that were going through at the Colorado level, also setting up our sister city programs. There's 7 different sister cities in which I would devise talking points and emphasis for the mayor as he traveled to these areas, and also as he hosted different folks. I worked with Air Force and key city officials to go and provide offsets for the security around these bases, and also DoD facilities that were tracking it to make sure that hostile foreign companies were not buying, in this case, land that was adjacent to some of the key assets that we have. Schriever and Peterson in particular hosting some of the crown jewels of our space capabilities that we have. Also worked with the Military Affairs Committee and the Economic Development folks within our city of Colorado Springs folks, and to include the city council members to go and try to encourage the growth and provide fast startup for companies who are trying to get a good foothold here, right? There's a fast track program that they have that can make it shovel ready, if you will. And if you're not quite there, the things you can do where you bring in, I think it was 20 different experts into the area to go and find the best ways to get your company moving forward. So I became very familiar with all those different entities. And I think that the combination of the background of a Space Command, Northern Command, which is NORTHCOM here, all the DoD and various government and NGOs areas, they would understand the bona fides that I provide when I sit down with these various companies and NGOs, because I would be able to go and talk that talk. I'm a very personable kind of leader that can relate to all different types of personnel and the situations. I believe that you should flex your own leadership style to the people that you are talking with, right? Some people react differently to ideas and goals, and they should be presented in different ways, right? I can take all of that and work together with the owners of these entities to make sure we have clear vision, goals, mission, objectives to go and focus and make their company even better.
So getting towards our kind of end of our time here, talk to me about the next 2 years, aspirations. Where do you see this going over the next 2 years?
Right. Well, I want to continue to grow and build this company up. I've been approached by several people who think this is a great idea and that I've got a lot to offer. My wife is also, she's an Air Force reservist, another colonel, and she's got a lot of expertise within organizational development and basically focusing on OSI detachments and squadrons who were struggling, and basically come on and do these reviews. So she's going to be helping me as well get some of this company off the ground and making sure that we can expand it. And the reason why, hey, just like everybody else, I've got a great family. I've got a son who's at University of New Mexico. Jack is a freshman. He's doing well there. I've got another son, Gabe, who is a senior at Palmer High School. Well, they got bills to pay, right? Which means dad's got bills to pay. So I need to work as hard as I can to make sure that I can get them through school. And that means being fully self-employed. So that's expanding the business that I have. It means making sure I can take care of my family and conversely also expanding within this city, right? I'm really involved in what is going on here in Colorado Springs and Colorado, but I do have lots of contacts all back through DC, all around the United States, and of course, still have some folks within the global areas where I was at in Japan and Germany. So really, I want to expand the business as best I can, and where it takes me is where I will go. So that's my idea for the next couple of years, Matt.
All right. Well, let's wrap up with a personal question. People that may know you may not know this. So what's the one thing that's kind of a surprise to those closest to you that are going to be like, I didn't know that about Chris?
Well, yeah. So just a little fun fact. So I alluded to that my time when I was with my stepfather, lots of travel all around all around the country and all different places. But I ended up my senior year was at Oklahoma. Right, it was Goodwell, Oklahoma, and the Panhandle of Oklahoma, which really was not huge. I left Texas A&M Consolidated High School, where I had 400 folks in my class, to 15 there in Goodwell High School, 15. So it was quite a culture shock for me. But despite all that, I was able to. Well, they didn't have cross country, so I couldn't compete in cross country, but they did have football. So I played 8-man football, which was also Ironman. So I was one of the 2 receivers and the safety on defense. But then they did have track. There's 3 people on our track team, and I ended up being the Oklahoma State champion in the 2-mile, and a runner-up in the mile. But when there's only like 3 people showing up for the whole state, right? And it's not exactly the best things. That's and I ended up parlaying that into running cross country at the Air Force Academy and doing track there. But just a little something that I thought was kind of a little whimsical little story.
Yeah.
But thanks. Yeah, good question.
So Chris, how did people reach you if they want to reach out and do a consult with you? Best ways of reaching you?
Sure, I can give them my email, which is Chris Ouellete, so CHRIS, and then OUELLETTE, then the number 6 @gmail.com. I've got a website coming up, which is O2 Solutions, but it's O2-solutions.org. And lastly, you can give me a call or text if you want, 318-205-0108, Matt.
And he's on LinkedIn as well. We'll be
yes,
sharing
sir.
this online, so ping him through LinkedIn. But this is Matt Sloniker. Hopefully you enjoyed this podcast with Chris and myself, and have a great rest of the week. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.